So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this farewell conversation with Ambassador Kelly, jointly hosted this evening by the Embassy of Ireland in the Netherlands and the Ireland-Netherlands Business Association. My name is Eithne Jones. I'm a long-term member of the Ireland-Netherlands Business Association, which has been making connections between Dutch and Irish business people over the last 25 years. I also run Speaker Ideas. We provide guest speakers for conferences and events, mostly corporate in nature. But this evening I find myself on this side of the camera because of this man, Ambassador Kevin Kelly, who from now on I'll be calling Ambassador.
Please do.
I won't indeed, I'll be calling you Kevin, excuse me. You'll be leaving shortly after 5 years in the Netherlands. And so we're going to look back at the 5 years, look at some highlights. There might have been some things you thought might have gone better. And I think most of the people watching will know you from one or other of your functions during the past 5 years. Indeed, you were a patron. You've been a very supportive patron of the INBA. That's how we got to know each other. So we're going to tease out all of those different functions and roles, but we're going to start, I thought we'd go back a little bit, to Boris and Ossory.
Oh, where it all started.
Where it all started. You're a proud Leishman. And I know, and maybe some people won't know this, you were a teacher for a while, but that didn't last very long. You were eager to learn again, and you went back to college to study. And very quickly after that, you got straight into NGO work with a visit to Ghana, if I'm right, as VSO. How did that come about? Why Africa? Why NGO work? We start there.
Let's start there. It's as good a place to start as any. Thanks, first of all, Eithne, and thank you to INBA for organising tonight. It's kind of an emotional experience to sit down and reflect, and even for preparing for this evening, looking back over the 5 years, so much has happened. But I just wanted to start by saying thank you very much, and thanks for moderating this discussion. So yes, Boris and Ossory, it all started in. But yes, I did. In fact, I ended up living in Africa for about 16 years. So Africa is a very, very important part of my life. And Africa is very huge, of course. That was five different countries within Africa. But I suppose if you ask me where it all started, I went to the Christian Brothers School in Roscrea, just across the border. And, you know, I know it sounds like one of those romantic Irish stories about Irish missionaries coming to the school and showing you pictures of the mission work in Zambia or other countries. But in fact, it had a huge influence on me. I always had a hankering to travel, and to travel, not just to go to London or New York or travel in Europe, but to go further afield. So as soon as I finished my studies, I did try to find an opportunity to go, and it was a fantastic experience with VSO in Ghana. And I spent a summer.
It was always going to be Africa. It wouldn't have been anywhere else with the VSO at that stage.
Yeah, there were other options actually of places you could go, but in fact, VSO was a great organization because they really, you know, they made sure it wasn't, of course, you're a young person, you're going to gain more than you give in terms of that period. But they really did do a lot of work in terms of training and cultural sensitization, and so I really wanted to go. So West Africa seemed like a great place to go, and that kind of really I fell in love. And from there, the way things happened, I changed my career after a while, like you said, went back to university. I did teach for a few years, but it wasn't really for me. And then went and did political studies, equality studies in UCD, worked with the National Youth Council of Ireland, and I kind of got into that NGO world. So I was working with Save the Children, I worked with Trokra, I worked with a great NGO in Botswana called Ditswanelo, the Botswana Centre for Human Rights. So I spent a long time in the non-profit voluntary sector before joining Foreign Affairs.
And of all the countries across Africa that you've worked in, I mean, where did you leave your heart? If there was one of them, that's a big question, because I know you were back recently with in relation to the UN Security Council vote as well. But where would absolutely be top of your list to go back to?
That's a very tough question because, you know, every country has great things about it and not so great things about it. And I really enjoyed, I mean, I had that short time in Ghana just as a volunteer, but, you know, lived for proper amounts of time in Botswana, first of all, in Southern Africa. which is a wonderful country, very kind of easy place to live.
Yeah.
People often joked and said, for expats, it's Africa for beginners, because it's
Easy
such
entry.
an easy
Yeah.
place to live. And I had wonderful relationships. I was the only outsider, the only Lahoa is the word in the Setswana language for outsider, working in that human rights NGO. So that was a wonderful start to life in Africa. But I subsequently lived in Rwanda. It was a very tough time just after the genocide.
Yeah. With Trokra?
So I was with Trokra,
Yeah.
and I was with my wife Pamela at the time. So we both were working with Trokra, and it was a very challenging time for the country. It was 1997, just 3 short years. And in fact, we had a little girl, Maya, was very small, and was with us during that time in Rwanda. So again, very powerful memories and relationships I've built up. But it also subsequently lived and loved Zambia and Uganda. But the reason I'm saying last is Ethiopia is probably the country that I loved probably the most. I was in Addis Ababa.
World Bank.
Well, actually, I was with Foreign Affairs. I was in our embassy there. I had joined Foreign Affairs in the year 2000, and I ended up working as a deputy head of mission, the head of our cooperation program in Ethiopia.
Right.
Again, very interesting time because it was a time of political change. And as we know, sadly, Ethiopia is going through a very difficult time at the moment, with a civil war underway. But I mean, Ethiopia, I think, is very special to anybody who, the relationships you form there, the friendships. I still have a huge network of friends from Ethiopia that perhaps I don't have as big networks in other countries. So that was a very long-winded way of saying Ethiopia.
It paints a lovely picture of the background and the travels. Now you're in The Hague. I mean, it must be down a level of excitement or in terms of just the cultural differences as well. But we'll get back to them.
Yeah.
So after Africa, you also played a role back at Department of Foreign Affairs headquarters in the business side of things. So you've been involved.
Well, initially, I when I went back after those years in Africa, I was humanitarian director. So it was more again in the same area, development cooperation. I was running our emergency and recovery programs, our humanitarian aid. And that was really, full on work because it's 24/7. And it was an excellent team of colleagues, but, it was just after the Haiti earthquake. We were dealing with trying to put a response together to the typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. So you're constantly dealing with these sudden impact emergencies that, of course, you want to get assistance out and make sure that Ireland is doing its bit. But they're also very political. That's what's very interesting. So, Ireland has a long and proud tradition of humanitarianism and development. So not only are you managing the programs and trying to get assistance out, but you're also dealing with, making sure that the Oireachtas, the Irish Parliament, is very well informed, that you're answering questions when needed, that you're, making sure that you're accountable for the funding that's spent. So I did that for a couple of years, but then I became the UN director.
Yes.
And that's when, so that was my last role in the political division. So I kind of crossed away at that point from development cooperation work. And so I've been gradually moving away from that, but you never really leave it. You always have a passion for that.
There's a red thread I think, in everything you've been doing, even now still. With a focus or an interest in that at least. So there's a question that came in here, and it's where I was moving. You're posting to the Netherlands. When you heard that, The Hague, somebody asks here, is the posting in The Hague a good posting for the start of an ambassador's career, the middle, or the end? So I think people might be curious to know, what was your first thought? How does that work actually? So that there are posts opening up. How does that work back in Dublin? You're in Dublin or you're in some other posting. There are rumors.
Yeah, I mean, the department, some people joke and they say, that in the Department of Foreign Affairs, you have a certain number of people who go abroad reluctantly, but they go because they have to, because the Department of Foreign Affairs, the hint is in the name, you have to go foreign. And there are other people who stay at home reluctantly and want to be away. And in fact, I'm in the latter category. I've
Right.
always been the person that was very happy to travel. I have to say it gets easier, it gets harder as you get older. You know, it's great when you're young and you can pack a few bags and, you know, start up a new life and reinvent yourself.
With family and everything.
But with a family and, you know, when your spouse is working and you have children in school, it's slightly more of a challenge. But to get back to your question, I mean, so the way it works is that, yeah, you know, when you're at home for a number of years, in my case, it was 5 years. At that time, you start to get itchy, or if you're not getting itchy, people are starting to push you out the door. Time to go. So there would be a list of the available postings, and then you express a preference, and you do an order of preference for countries. Doesn't always work out. I remember the list that I filled in for Ethiopia. It might have been on the bottom of my list, and suddenly I got offered Ethiopia. And
can I ask you where would have been top of your list?
Well, at that time I was on the development side of things, and I think I can't even recall where I was on the top. But in fact, you know, again, people joke. They say this is no offense meant to all my wonderful Ethiopian friends, but sometimes as expats, you hear, oh, people, you cry when you hear you're going to Ethiopia, but you cry when you're leaving it. And that's really what happened. So it ended up being the best experience that I had.
Or were there tears when you heard the Hague?
There were no tears. I was absolutely delighted. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting in the Hague, but it was such a change for me because of being away, as I said, for 16 years in Africa. First European posting. The Netherlands is a very important country for Ireland. And I mean, the questioner, that's a very astute question. Is it somewhere you go at the start of your career or at the end of your career? I'm sure some of my colleagues in the embassy would wish it was at the end of your career, because maybe you're a bit slowing down and you're not as dynamic or active or energetic.
To hop to it,
But I would say, I mean, it's such an exciting place to be. And, you know, it's in many ways, it's very easy place to come to because we are very like-minded with the Dutch. I think we like each other, we get each other, similar sense of humor. You know, the people speak fantastic English, and even though I tried to do the learn Dutch at the start, and betcha, don't really, you know, because after a while people speak such good English, and you know, so there's a huge amount of pluses for being in the Netherlands. But in particular, one of the big positives is that it's not just a bilateral mission. It's also multilateral. And I can explain.
I'd like you to talk me through that, because that was one of the things, you know, I spoke with a couple of people before, just to get a picture of you and the role. And several times it was mentioned just how broad the remit of the embassy is here, multi-portfolio. And I believe you roll your sleeves up with equal enthusiasm across each of them. And that was mentioned a couple of different times by fellow diplomats, but also people who work here with some of the institutions. So do tell me.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a dream posting in many ways because, you know, bilateral work, and I'll explain what that is.
Please
so,
do,
I mean, that's Ireland's relationship with the Netherlands. That's about making sure that those relations are strong at a political level, at an economic level. Trade is growing, business is booming, people-to-people links are growing. And also the core work of any embassy, which is often forgotten, but it's the consular work. It's actually supporting Irish citizens living in this country. And there's over 10,000 Irish people living in the Netherlands. But a huge amount of people coming in all the time and visiting the Netherlands. So the bilateral work is very, very busy in any embassy, because at the end of the day, you can do great things in terms of facilitating meetings with Taoiseach and political visits. But if you don't have, you know, the system in place to provide consular support to Irish citizens. And a little plug now at the end of my first plug of the evening, but I mean, I have a wonderful team in the embassy, both local staff, locally recruited staff, and our Irish posted staff who really keep that show on the road. And it means 24/7. It means
I can imagine
having the phone always there, because, you know, you're very often, you know, colleagues will get calls in the middle of the night and it's a distraught parent from Ireland or somebody's missing and terrible tragedy. So that can be the hard part of the work, but hugely fulfilling as well. and the whole passport services and
Well,
registering the births of
yes,
new
yeah.
Irish citizens. So a lot of that stuff. So that's all the
Yeah.
bilateral
Yeah.
portfolio.
Yeah.
And I can answer any questions you have on that. But the multilateral then is the kind of the international organizations.
Yeah.
And people think multilateral, they think New York,
Yes.
they think Geneva.
Yeah.
They don't often think The Hague. But in fact, The Hague is known as the city of peace and justice.
Yeah.
And that's why, because that's where a lot of the key tribunals and organizations are. So the International Criminal Court is here, the International Court of Justice is here, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and the OPCW, which is the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Organization. So as ambassador here, I get to be Ireland's representative to all those bodies, which is hugely interesting. Yeah. But like you said, it's very demanding and there's a lot of juggling involved.
So how do you decide to juggle? Or does what's happening in the world, or does what's happening on a consular level, or does what's happening bilaterally? What takes precedence, or do you get to decide where you put your focus? Or does Dublin say, could you pay a bit more attention to this now, please?
Yeah, I mean, there is that. We do have, we have a statement of strategy as the Department of Foreign Affairs. Okay. We have our business plan as an embassy. Yep. And so at the start of every year, you set your priorities and we try to juggle our resources, our people between where we're going to invest most time and energy. Yep. Between the multilateral and the consular. But you have to keep everything going. Yep. At all at once. Yep. But who was it said, events, dear boys, yes, that, sometimes events take over. And if there's a major consular crisis or a major emergency, that takes over. Yeah. If you hear, like last week, with about 5 hours notice that our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, is going to be passing through the Netherlands, you drop everything and you make sure that that's happens. So there's a certain amount that you can prioritize and you can plan based on stuff on the calendar and things that are happening. Yeah. But very often, and that's what makes it great, no 2 days are the same,
I love that idea. I want to come back to the OPCW particularly because I know people are curious about Ireland's role in it. Well, actually, let's go at that. But I want to come back to the visits later because you've had not quite a revolving door, but you've been busy over the last 5 years and both directions. Yeah. The royal visit as well. And I know you've got some great stories that you would like to share with everyone. But the OPCW, tell me a little bit about it. And how did Ireland get to play what seems to be a fairly solid key role in the running of that?
Well, the OPCW is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. And most people would have thought chemical weapons, that happened back in World War I, and that's a thing of the past. And happily it was, because it's one of the most successful disarmament organizations in the world in terms of the complete ban and prohibition of chemical weapons. So for many years, I'm sure in the past, my predecessors, it's not that old, the organization, but in the past, the OPCW would have been a relatively benign, calm organization because everybody agreed chemical weapons are a bad thing and we're all going to ban it. Unfortunately, and I won't blame myself for this because it happened before I arrived, but things, very sadly, chemical weapons have become a reality again in terms of their use in Syria, where there's been now very credible evidence gathered by the organization, by its inspectors, to say that chemical weapons have been used in Syria. Yeah. But even not just in Syria, even closer to home in the UK, I'm sure you read the news reports of the use of chemical weapons in Salisbury and the Skripal case. So that's a bit of background to say that the OPCW was a relatively perhaps harmonious place, but in fact, it's become quite contested political space. Yeah. And why, I suppose, at the moment, Ireland is playing an important role is because we're also on the UN Security Council. Yes. And so what we decided in The Hague is very, very important for how we approach that file in New York. And so there's a regular line of communication between The Hague and Dublin and New York. So we have to make sure that line is there.
So you were here and you had left the UN director role in Ireland. but you were pulled back in to help with the effort to get Ireland onto the Security Council seat. And I think that's very close to your heart, that whole.
Yeah, I was really lucky because I joined, I became UN director when Ireland was, well, we had announced our bid to go for election to the UN Security Council.
Yeah.
And in fact, we only go for the UN Security Council every 20 years. We don't overdo it because it's a very big ask for a small country
Yeah.
and you're going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
So we announced our candidature a long time ago, but it was my job to kind of start the basis, laying the foundations,
Yeah.
the early thinking about systems we'd need to put in place in Dublin, how we'd approach it, what the themes might be for our campaign.
Yeah.
And we fought a long campaign to get elected.
Yeah.
We were going for election in the Western European and other group.
Yeah.
We were up against two very credible candidates and two very close friends, Canada and Norway, but there were only 2 seats. So it was always going to be a very challenging election. So I was very much part of that campaign in Dublin. And I was very honored then that I was appointed by our minister to be an envoy for the campaign, even here when I was in The Hague. So to do that, I was an envoy for Africa, along with some others. And so what that meant was I did quite a bit of travel to Africa, to different countries, in order to look for the vote, in order to try to, from the Netherlands, to secure that vote for Ireland for the campaign.
Well, congratulations. That must feel like a high point also to see something culminate in such.
It's great, and it's great to be. I played a small part in it, but it feels great to be part of that, you know. But there's a huge team of people who are part of that.
I should mention here to people listening and watching, please do send in your questions if you have any or comments. They will be fed through to this little machine right here, and I'll be happy to relay them to Kevin. And if we don't get around to them, be assured that he will get to see them afterwards. Visits.
Okay.
So there's so much to talk about because it's been 5 years. There are 2 words we can't not talk about, and they're B and C: Brexit and COVID, and what the impact they had on the operations of the embassy, and also for your own role as a man living here with his family back in Ireland, but also as an ambassador in the consular side of things. But let's start with the visits, because I've been lucky enough to be invited along as a member of INBA to a number of Irish, senior Irish politicians who would have come here, and there must be an amazing amount of work that goes into making these things happen properly.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask you, which was the best visit here, and which was the absolute and total catastrophe? Like, who was it who visited that you would want to warn all of your colleagues around the world? Go on holidays when this person's gone. There's just yourself and myself.
And you think I'm going to answer that?
I thought maybe I could try.
You're very cheeky. You did warn me there'd be a few grenades thrown in there.
Look, otherwise.
No, look, can I just give a little background first of all on the visits before I answer that question? But Ireland and the Netherlands, as I said, have always been very close, and we're very like-minded, and we agree on most things. No, not everything. There's a few issues where there might be slight differences and nuance in opinion, but in general, we agree in most things. And so our politicians would meet frequently in Brussels. And in fact, I was here. When you're an ambassador in Africa, you really are representing Ireland because the ministers are not coming in. There's not that many visits. If you get a visit, it's a big deal, and you might get a ministerial visit once every 2 years. But in the Netherlands, 12 flights a day in normal times is a huge amount of contact. And what I did learn is that, politicians and ministers have each other on mobile phone. In fact, I remember once I was at a meeting, and I was early on, and I was getting what's it like to be an ambassador in Europe and what's my role vis-a-vis, because that the Taoiseach is in touch with the Dutch Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. But I was having a chat with the former Foreign Minister, Bert Koenders, at a meeting here, and suddenly we're having a good discussion, and I was putting forward a few points, but then his phone rang, and he said, oh, it's Simon. And he meant Minister Simon Coveney,
your boss,
who was calling him my boss. Of course, I had to pretend that I was party to the whole thing, and
was
I knew
it a good cop, bad cop situation, or did you just
that it was going on. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of contact, but Brexit was a game changer.
Yeah.
And so Brexit is bad news. I'll get that out at the start.
Yeah.
No, there's nobody in the Irish government will say that Brexit, is not something we wanted. It's something that we regret happened, but it's a reality.
Yeah.
But, if one is to look for some, I suppose, silver linings in an otherwise very challenging experience,
Yeah.
is the fact that it has deepened our relationship. And there's been, in my time alone, we've had, former Taoiseach Enda Kenny came here, former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar came here, former Taoiseach Micheál Martin passed through here, but very briefly last week. And we've had Prime Minister Mark Rutte going to Dublin, Minister Steph Block. So there's a huge amount of backwards and forwards. And, so it's been great, and that's because out of all of the countries in the EU affected by Brexit, the Netherlands and Ireland are very seriously affected. So they took it seriously and took the planning seriously. So there was a huge amount of contact, a huge amount to talk about. And so it's great as, so I can't answer your question about who, in fact, everybody's great because they all come in, they want to engage. And it's a very busy program. Sometimes it can be exhausting. You have program running.
But everyone's got the green jersey on. They're all trying to get the same.
Everybody is, and it's we're very and it's a great way because there's only so much an ambassador can do representing. But when you have your political leadership in, they're the ones that really represent the Irish government.
Is that show of unity? Is it for real within Europe? Within like bilaterally, have the Dutch done and the Irish, have they been really solid and supporting? Is there some show in that? Or have they been as supportive, the Dutch, as you would have liked them to have been?
I have to say it's phenomenal. The amount of support that Ireland has got in terms of our key positions for Brexit. Now, it's not something that happened automatically. We worked at it. And as I said, our politicians worked at it. They worked at it in Brussels and they worked at it in terms of fanning out across Europe and meeting with other European leaders, including here in the Netherlands. But I would say to you, Eithne, it's not a show. The support that we got right across Europe, there was a huge amount of real unity in terms of the EU 27. Now, for us, that's delicate because the UK was and is and will always be a very close neighbour. We have a long history, a long shared history. Our relationship had really improved, actually, with the royal visits of Her Majesty to Ireland and our president visiting the UK. So our relationship was never better, ironically, before Brexit. So it was a real destabilizer. So for us, Ireland wants to we want to maintain our relationship with the UK, but at the same time, we wanted to, and we got such support from the UK. But it was a real, you mentioned the green jersey, and it's sometimes a bit of a cliche, but it really was. And it was people getting out there. And, we were so supported with our colleagues back in Dublin. And so I was really right around the country at many events in The Hague and in Amsterdam, speaking wherever I was invited to speak, so that I would give that position. And, I think, we have enjoyed full solidarity from the Dutch. I'm happy to say that.
So I'm here, I'm going to have to ask you, because I'm just curious. You walk into a room and it's full of European ambassadors or international ambassadors, and the British ambassador is there. And are you all in one little corner and poor old British ambassador is over and he's, how does that work out? Are you?
No, and in fact, I've always really worked, and it hasn't been work. I've cultivated very good relationships with in fact, God, I have 5 years, it's a long time. I'm on my third UK ambassador now. But the current one, Joanna Roper, will see me out. So because I'm leaving. But no, so there's a lot of contact. I suppose it was a bit of an adjustment because the EU, we would meet and the UK would be there. And then suddenly they weren't there. And so that is a real challenge. And I know the UK now has other networks and alliances that it's also forming. But the EU group has, it is a club of countries that we do, and we collaborate and we engage with the Dutch in a very positive, constructive way.
Well, I think this brings in then one of the other focuses, your promotion of Irish business here. And Irish business opportunities, because obviously the Netherlands, as well as the rest of mainland Europe, is a massively growing in importance for Irish business. so you work very closely with Team Ireland, I think we can call you, right? Can you tell us a bit about that, what you've seen developing over the 5 years here?
Well, again, it'll sound a bit boastful as if I'm taking credit for this, but trade has grown by 40% since 2016.
Well done, well done.
No, I can't take credit for it. I am in a very great position that as ambassador, I'm heading up the local market team. And it's great because, in fact, we have 3 agencies here. We have Enterprise Ireland, and we have Tourism Ireland, and we have Board BIA, which is our food board. They all have offices in Amsterdam. They all have ambitious targets and programs. And I mean, the trade has really taken off. Some of it is a consequence of Brexit, but a lot of it is to do with a huge amount of effort that's gone in to diversify Irish exports. So, I mean, the Netherlands is now the 7th largest export market for Ireland. You know, it's about 8.5 billion euros worth of exports from Ireland in goods here every year. And, you know, even Board BIA, our food board, broke their target of €1 billion of food exports in 2019 and kept it up in 2020 in this terrible time that we've been through. So, I mean, it's great that I'm working with those partners, but also with the likes of you, Eithne, and with INBA, the Ireland Netherlands Business Association, led by Gordon Campbell and all of the team, Hildegard, who, you know, because at the end of the day, it's about people to people links, and business links. So, you know, it's great for me that in addition to the government state agencies, that we have voluntary outfits such as the Ireland Netherlands Business Association.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the group, and I think you were hardly in the country a wet week.
Not even a week.
You weren't even a week. And you were at one of our events. And I know I can say this on behalf of the members, at least of INBA, that we've always really supported or really appreciated your support. You've been at every event that you were invited to. We were invited to all of them. You've spoken at them. You've understood who's in the audience, and you've learned about what's relevant for them, and you've spoken in that way. And you've always been very warm and approachable to all of the members. So that's been noted. But also, I think very importantly, you mentioned it there, it's a voluntary organization, the Ireland Netherlands Business Association, but it was thanks to your support and encouragement that they took the step to apply for the Emigrant Support Program. I just want to mention that here too, which has actually allowed a kind of a step change within the association. They've been able to take on the magnificent Moira, who's a project manager, who's back there somewhere, put this all together. So, you know, thank you for that, if I can just get that out there. Okay, so that's...
No, it's good. And I mean, a lot of credit goes. And in fact, you know, again, there's always silver linings, isn't there? But the pandemic, and I'm sure we'll get onto the pandemic, but in a way, there's been a real rebirth in terms of INBA's work in the last year, very cleverly focused on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and a huge amount of activity happening online. So there's been a real renaissance of activity and energy, and a huge amount of credit goes to Gordon and Hildegard and Moira and yourself. And I'm not going to, I'm failing to mention all the board, but there's some great people.
No, it's great. There's good stuff happening. You're right. We will mention the pandemic. And now I'm of two minds, because we would, let's go back to the visits, because the royal visits, the King and Queen went to Ireland, and the Queen of Ireland came to the Netherlands. So we have to, you know, both of those, were they high points?
Absolute high points. I mean,
so which one will you start? It's up to you.
Well, let me start with, I'll start with because we're talking about the trade and the business and the bilateral links. So maybe I'll talk about the royal visit of His Majesty King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima to Ireland. It happened in 2019. And you know, it's always a high point. It doesn't, of course, it's extra sparkle when it's a king and queen. But a state visit when you're an ambassador, either an incoming state visit or an outgoing state visit, is hugely important. And you might think, oh, so, you know, what's the point? You know, why? That's expensive, isn't it? And what's the benefit and all that, and the banquet here and an event here, and, you know, it's hugely symbolically important. So, I mean, when I came here, it was an ambition, a quiet, you have to keep it quiet because it mightn't work out. But it was a quiet ambition that we would manage to get a royal visit, a state visit to Ireland by their majesties. And I was so thrilled that it worked out. And a lot of work goes behind the scenes. In a way, I'm very fortunate as being the Irish ambassador here. I can lobby for the visit and support it, but a lot of the work goes to the Dutch embassy and my colleague Adrian, the ambassador in Dublin. I think he's tuning in this evening, and the team there that did so much to make a great success of that visit. But I mean, the symbolic importance of it. You know, the year before, it was they had gone to the UK. And that was an important signal as well. North Sea neighbours, the Netherlands and the UK are very, very close. And there's a lot of links between the Dutch and the British royal families. But the very next visit was to Ireland. And I think that was symbolically important.
Great planning.
That we did it. And it was a great success.
You were no stranger to King Willem-Alexander or to Queen Maxima. Could I ask you to share your story about your first meeting with Queen Maxima?
Oh, now you're being, I don't know who has fed you.
I do my research. I didn't get where I am without doing my
research. Hard talk, I think.
Well, they're coming. That's at the back of the book. But
I think what you're referring to is a slightly embarrassing incident at the palace, but which I hoped wouldn't come up.
Because it's pomp and ceremony. You arrive, right? You arrive, you're beautiful in your white tie.
In your white tie. And, you know, well, in fact, I should say a little bit about that. First of all, when you come to the Netherlands, there's some great traditions and ceremonies about being, when they welcome an ambassador. You know, we have also a very nice ceremony in Dublin for ambassadors who come to Dublin, and they go to Áras and Uachtaráin and they meet our Uachtaráin and Nahéireann, the President of Ireland. But here it's also very special. You know, a horse-drawn carriage comes and collects you and brings you to the palace, where you meet the king and you sit down and you have a very nice, you officially present your credentials. I often joke with Pamela, my wife, she flew in on the Ryanair flight that morning, crammed on a flight, and within a few hours, on time, she was on time, but a few hours later, she was at the palace meeting the king of the Netherlands. And then about 6 hours later, she had to go back for work. So it was back on the Ryanair flight. So it's a good level of. So, I mean, I know I'm trying to sidestep the question.
Don't, because I'm going to keep up.
Yeah, I'll get there. But so there's a number of events in the year where you do get to meet the king and queen. And it's always very nice when you get to have a personal conversation. But it doesn't always happen. There's a huge diplomatic community here. And it's done, again, in my naivety. This wasn't written in my handover notes. When I arrived here, but because I thought you could just, after the formal events, the royal family will spread out in different parts of a very crowded room, and they're talking to different ambassadors. So I thought, why not? I'll head up and say hello.
The way you would.
The way you would. Until I realized, no, you have to wait to get the tap on the shoulder. So I didn't get the tap on the shoulder for a while. But the story you're referring to is one day when the visit was being planned and it was in the offing. And so then you become a person of interest more. So I did have the honor of having a few private conversations, both with Princess Beatrix, the former queen, and with King Willem-Alexander. But I think the embarrassing incident you're asking me to
we only have a few minutes left now. So if you wouldn't mind moving on to the embarrassing.
No, I got the tap that, would you like to have a word with the king? Of course you say yes, I'd be most honored. But we were making our way through a very crowded hall in the palace in Amsterdam. And it was quite crowded. It was pre-COVID, so everybody was milling around. And at one point, we were blocked because there were so many people around where the king was. But this courtier, I don't know if that's the correct word in Dutch, but was escorting me up to meet His Majesty. And suddenly we stopped stationary, and I stood there, and then suddenly I could feel under my feet something, something pulling. And I looked up, and there was a lady gently pulling, and it turned out to be Her Majesty, the Queen, and I was standing on the train of her dress. So that's the humiliating incident. Luckily, Her Majesty is either a good sport or a bad memory. I think it's probably the former.
Well, we'll call her the good.
I think she's so dignified that she never raised it afterwards, and no damage was done.
No, obviously
I think to her beautiful outfit.
I think that
a lot of damage was done to my.
Well, I'm sorry, but it won't go any further. Told me. I think that visit. I was very proud as an Irish citizen here in the Netherlands watching it on social media and on the news, etc. And there was another visit, another royal visit, and I think it was. You've been called, I've spoken to a few people. It comes up again and again, a modern diplomat representing a modern Ireland. And one of the visits that came up again and again was the Queen of Ireland. You had tea with the Queen, and it touched an awful lot of people.
I have to explain that now.
Yeah, I'm not going to explain
because
it.
we don't have a monarchy. We're a proud republic in Ireland. But I think you're referring to the incomparable Panty Bliss.
The one and only.
And AKA Rory O'Neill,
Exactly.
Who came here for Pride. It was a great time. I think it's 2 years ago now, probably it was pre-COVID 2019. And Ireland, again, with a lot of pushing from our side and our team, we joined the Equal Rights Coalition of countries fighting for the equal rights of the LGBTQI community.
Yeah.
And so we joined a coalition of states along with the Netherlands. And Pride is a very big event in the Netherlands. So we wanted to celebrate that fact that Ireland had joined this Equal Rights Coalition. Yeah. And it was a great time of excitement. Ireland had just passed the marriage equality referendum, and Rory O'Neill or Panty Bliss had done a number of visits to visit some of our missions in different countries. So we invited Rory O'Neill. The reason why you're saying the Queen of Ireland is that a fantastic movie was made of Panty Bliss, the life of Rory O'Neill, called The Queen of Ireland. So we invited, and I'll say Rory because he was Rory for this event. He came as Rory O'Neill. And so we had a great event with the wonderful Dutch journalist Titia Ketelaar, who hosted a really great conversation. And then we watched this very edgy movie, actually with my son Noah beside me. But it's such a great movie. If anybody hasn't seen it, I'm sure it's out there. And then, so that was on the Friday evening, and we had a Q&A with Titia and an audience in The Hague. And it was just a great opportunity for Rory is such an eloquent speaker, very gifted, but very intelligent political commentator, and raised a huge amount of very interesting issues. So I remember that evening we left Rory back to the hotel, and then the following morning was the Pride boat, the Equal Rights Coalition boat in Amsterdam, where all the embassies were gathered. So I arrived at the hotel to collect Panty Bliss. This was going to be. There was a lot of waiting, and because there's a lot of makeup and and I don't know if you've seen Panty Bliss, but it's very beautiful. Panty Bliss arrived out. So I mean, if you've seen, I think on the invite that went out for this event, there's a photograph of a delighted me with Panty Bliss on the boat.
On the boat, that's
so Panty Bliss was the star of the show, and she was the real focus of this Equal Rights Coalition boat. But it was a really important message for about Ireland and our values as a multicultural society. And a great thanks goes to Panty Bliss for doing that.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions and comments coming in. I see Adrian Palm, the Dutch ambassador in Dublin, is sending you his best wishes all the way from Dublin. And he's asking you, where do you see Irish-Dutch relations go in the next 5 years? Where will we experience the biggest change?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question I'm going to ask him the next time I see him as well. I'm sure he'll have a lot. Well, I think, we're going to see a continued deepening of our relationship. And that, as I said, I was kind of boasting about the work of my great colleagues in the agencies, Board B and Enterprise Ireland and Tourism Ireland in particular, and the IDA in terms of, the growing trade links, and new things have happened even in the last year, new shipping routes between the Netherlands and Ireland, rather than going through the land bridge of the UK. So I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more direct links. I mentioned earlier in our conversation, Bert Koenders, the former Dutch foreign minister, and he joked, I met him at an event in Dublin just when I had been appointed ambassador. And he joked to a former foreign minister of Ireland, he said, look, we're both very sad about Brexit, but he said that one positive will be that when the fog lifts over the UK and the UK leaves the European Union, both countries will be able to see each other more clearly. Yeah. And I think we will. So I can, to Adrian, I'd see there'll be stronger political links, and it'll be around the issues that we share common views. So it'll be about our values, about our principles as the European Union. There's a whole range of files across the EU that we can deepen our collaboration. And in fact, Brexit perhaps sucked quite a bit of the oxygen out of it took a lot of space dealing with Brexit and preparing for Brexit and handling the negotiations and ensuring that the Dutch understood our position and that we understood the Dutch position in those messages. I think once that situation calms down, we'll then now begin to, so my successor will have an opportunity, I think, to deepen those relationships with Adrian.
Okay, so you talked, thank you for that. You've talked about Brexit. We've talked about Brexit sucking the energy out of the room, the oxygen out of the room. The pandemic, COVID. I mean, you know, luckily, as you've mentioned yourself, you were here when you could see how real diplomacy, what the real life of a diplomat looked like. But the last year and a half, another message I had from people, your newsletters were like a warm blanket of comfort.
Oh,
lifting spirits. Now, you told me not to go too easy on you, but I'm just writing I'm just telling you what's written down here. It was a really difficult time for an awful lot of people. And the gezellig sessions, where'd that come from? Well, first of all, COVID as a diplomat, as somebody heading a mission, but also as a father and husband here, and they're there.
Yeah, well, the personal stuff was hard. I'll be brief on that because I was in a great situation where I could go home every fortnight to Dublin, and it's very commutable, 12 flights a day, which hopefully the airlines tuned in. We'll get back to that when things start to normalize. So all that stopped, and I didn't see, like my family. But I'm not alone. No. Many Irish people here living in the Netherlands who didn't get to see their families and missed important occasions and funerals like I did, and so I did only get home last year for the summer and Christmas. Once the thing had kicked off, but the bigger question is about the embassy, and diplomacy is about relationships. It's about shaking hands. It's about, you can read the newspapers, but you can do that from Dublin. You can have Zoom calls. You can do that from anywhere. But it's about the contact, and it's about the physical engagements that you have. And like you said, Eithne, I'm very lucky that at least I came here at a time I had a few good years where life was normal, and I got out and I had those relationships and I built up contacts, got around the country, got to see the beauty of the Netherlands, Groningen and Maastricht and great number of places. But, for my new colleagues now who have arrived, new ambassadors that have arrived in the last year and they've been stuck behind a screen, it's really, really difficult. So it's been a real challenge, our craft, diplomacy, to do the work, and hopefully it'll get back to normal, but also challenging for people and worry and anxiety and the stress that people are feeling. So I'm very glad to hear that the letters and our attempts to reach out to the Irish community was appreciated, because sometimes you'd struggle, I have to admit, as every week, what will I say now? There's no big news, nothing is really happening. But I did know from feedback we got that people appreciated our attempt. And as I said, there's 10,000 Irish people living in this country. The gezellig sessions was, I think, a great idea we had in the embassy to do. We didn't want to do, because everybody's tired of online and webinars and events, except the people who are tuned into this fascinating discussion, I'm sure.
Thank you.
But there's a certain amount of online fatigue. So what we said we'd do is, why don't we, gezellig is a beautiful Dutch word. It's one of my favorites, and it means to the Irish people tuned in, it's kind of cozy, it's something warm, you're in your house, it's winter, the fire is lit, it's gezellig. So we use that word to kind of, when we invited Irish people, some professionals, we had some people who won Grammy Awards, we had some people who are professional musicians, we had some people who are just great singers and could sing an old song or do a jig or play the guitar, and they played their tune, they uploaded it, and we downloaded twice a week, and we build it up, and the gezellig performance for today is, and it would be up on our social media. So people
Bravo,
could tune
well done,
in for
yeah.
4 minutes. But it was just a nice thing to kind
Yeah.
of bind people together.
Yeah.
But it just shows the creativity you need actually to and that's my team, my great team in the embassy as well, that we tried to kind of see where you could think outside the box and do some things like that.
Well, it was appreciated. So I thank you myself as well. A couple of questions. We'll keep them brief.
Okay.
Did Ambassador Kelly make a serious attempt to learn the Dutch language? Sean, thank you.
I don't know who Sean is. Ambassador Kelly made a very serious attempt, but it's a serious amount of time ago now.
Okay, good. We'll keep it brief. As I promised, Andrew has come and asked, have you considered writing a memoir? I assume there are a lot of stories that will not see the light of day until you no longer need diplomatic immunity. Have you considered writing a memoir?
Oh, you know what?
You're too young for that.
I'm too
He's
young.
for that, Andrew.
I'm only 53.
Come back to him in
maybe in the
20
future,
years.
but I need to build a few more stories, you know.
Another quick one. What is the greatest skill that an ambassador can have, and what is the hardest part of the role?
Okay.
I don't know who sent that in. But...
Okay. I mean, the greatest skill, I mean, there's always a debate about, as a diplomat, are you a generalist? You need to know a little bit about everything, or are you a specialist where you really are, you know, a genius on chemical weapons, and you know, and there's a bit of, you need to kind of be a master of everything and a master of nothing at the same time. So I think the biggest skill is to be able to internalize information and be able to communicate that information. But it is really about that ability to connect. It's about relationships. It's about being able to talk to people, no matter if it's a king or, you know, somebody you meet in an assembly line or an Irish citizen who's in distress or, you know, or a business person, you know, but it's about, I think, that thing about communicating. And what was the second part? It was about the hardest part.
Yeah, what's the hardest, what's the skill, and what is the hardest part of the role?
Well, the hardest part, in fact, is probably the best part at certain times of your life, you know, where, as I said to you, when you're younger, you pack your bags and jump in a plane and get off. After a while, that kind of gets a bit more demanding, I have to say. And I find that now, you know, that you go back, you're constantly having to reinvent yourself. I'm going back to a new role in Dublin. I have to now be something completely different than I was, which is great. It's so exciting, and it gets the adrenaline going, but it can also be tiring, and it takes a lot of energy to kind of muster that up. So you have to kind of have that energy. That's, I'll stop there because you said short answer.
Thank you very much for listening. Most people don't. Quick fire round.
Oh no, I thought that was the quick fire.
No, that was a quick, well, it was kind of, but I have, so you're heading home back to Ireland. You have to make some choices of what you keep and what you leave behind. So
I have to look at my notes now. Do I have anything?
No, golly, no. I hope nobody gave you these notes. These are literally just top of your head.
I have nothing.
Stroop waffles or fig rolls?
Stroopwafel, definitely.
Okay, I'm just going to note this. All right. Pilsje or pint?
A pint.
Pint. Okay. Clogs or wellies?
Oh, wellies for the electric picnic, especially.
The electric picnic, we'll have to get back to that. The bike or the bus?
Oh, the bike. I mean, the bike has been the best thing. I know it's quick fire, but
no, carry on.
It's been the best, one of the best things about this country. I mean, the infrastructure, it's just amazing. I mean, I can cycle from the residence to the embassy. It's 10 kilometers. For a good part of that, I'm on leafy little lanes without any traffic. It's an amazing gift that successive governments in this country have given to the Dutch people, and can be very proud of it. It's something that I know Adrian, who mentioned, he's working to cultivate, and there's a growing bicycle culture in Dublin as well, but we're not at that point. So the bicycle, without a doubt. Okay,
so that wasn't exactly quick fire, but let that go. It's a good point. Bitterballen or tato?
Potatoes.
Erwtensoep or Irish stew? Pea soup or Irish stew?
Oh, pea soup, definitely. That's a nice Dutch delicacy.
And coffee verkeerd or Barry's tea?
Barry's tea.
Barry's tea.
You're never going to get an Irish ambassador saying anything.
No, and we know that there are other brands available, but we just, for the purposes of keeping it quick fire, we stay with that. Well, thank you for that. We're coming to the end here, and I know that there's been a lot of interest. I'm not going to get around to all of the questions. Let's see. We did the Dutch language thing, and I think you answered that fairly well. What next for Kevin? What next for Ambassador Kelly? You're heading back to Dublin. You're going to be in the communications.
Yes, I'm going back as our Director of Communications, Head of Communications in the Foreign Ministry. So, yeah, that's a big new challenge. And what's great about it is that it's broad. It's the whole breadth of the work. And we've got a very great team, I understand, back in Dublin. And so rather than being just Europe or Africa or Asia or, you know, I'll have that kind of bird's eye view. So that's really what I'll be doing. Don't ask me what the job will entail because I don't know. And I'm kind of saying that's next. I've learned to do that too. That'll come. And once I get on my holidays and I'm on my homeward stretch, I'll start to think very much about what that role. But I'm looking forward to it.
Good stuff. Any message you'd like to put out there? Just we're running into the last minute or two. Anything you'd like to say to the diaspora, to the people to your colleagues, your peers? I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to meet with some people, but some people won't get to meet you before you leave. Any thoughts? Brief?
Yeah, brief. And I know that there's people behind the camera who'll cut me off. So, it's been a great experience. And, well, maybe one message I'd give to my yet to be appointed successor would be, don't just stay in The Hague. Get out of this. The Hague is beautiful. The one thing I love about the Netherlands is the built environment and the cities and the towns. There's such beauty and they're all so different. There's such diversity in a smaller country than Ireland, by the way.
Incredible,
I often remind, physically smaller in terms of the geography of the country, but there's such diversity there. But in terms of a message would be, to get out and experience Dutch life, because there's some great things that you can take away from your time here in this country.
You've enjoyed it. You like the Netherlands. You like working with the Dutch people. I mean, I picked that up from you.
Very much so. I really do. And people joke, some of my closest colleagues joke that I've become very Dutch in my approach, so I might have to wipe that a bit out of me.
Does that mean like straight?
Being a bit, well, I've always tended to be a bit direct to the point, but maybe, that's something, but I think there's a real virtue in that, being honest with people, saying it as it is. And you always know where you stand when you're with a Dutch person. And I think that's, I appreciate that. But the final word will be just, you mentioned the diaspora, and given that this is organized by a diaspora organization, is that, there's one ambassador appointed at a time, but there's so many ambassadors, and I'll get myself into trouble mentioning them all, but it is people like you and Hildegard and Gordon Campbell. It's people like Mary Gavin in The Hague, who I often joke is she's the real ambassador, who's been here forever, and always provide support and engage. So it is that, and the GAA and the work that it does in this country, and the fact that we've teams of footballers and hurlers in some places all around the country. They're the people actually, representing the country, and we do it well, and that's why we have a good relationship in this country. It's about the people and the relationships that they've built up. And so I want to thank all of the people that I've worked with over that time. So thank you very much.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to finish it on. I would just like to say to you, Guramila Mahagat. Agus Ganairi Gugyalat Ashama.
Guramila Mahagat Eithne. Slán.
Slán.